So intelligent disobedience. I've had a number of people come up to me and ask me about that this morning, and often when I do a presentation of this nature, you get a little bit about me, a little tongue-in-cheek associated with the certifications, but I have a question to ask you. When you look at that title, how many of you are intrigued by the intelligent part of the title? Does that mean the rest of you want the disobedience part of the title? All right, we're going to do the renegade version this morning, it looks like. I wish I'd come up with the term intelligent disobedience, but I did not. But as a means of describing intelligent disobedience, let me tell you the origin of the term. It comes from the world of seeing-eye dogs. Picture this, if you will. You're at a street corner, and it's an audible corner, so not only do you have the light changing and the clock ticking down, but you also have an audible tone when it goes from a stop to walk. And you are with your seeing-eye dog. Your seeing-eye dog is on a rigid harness, and that's for two reasons. It helps the dog guide you, but it also helps the dog bring you along in the movements that it is making. So you hear the signal, go to walk, and you start to push the dog forward to indicate that you want to go forward and cross the street. However, the dog has other information. There's a car parked at the curb going to back into the crosswalk into your way. What do you want the dog to do? Good, this is the interactive part. It is, you're getting on there, this is good, okay? Yes, you want the dog to put on the brakes. You want the dog to disobey its master. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the instance, the context, some of the tools, some of the perspectives of how we do something other than what our bosses ask us to do. Now, as you go home or maybe to the next break or maybe even during this presentation, you'll say, hang on a minute. He called us dogs and our master's blind. Sometimes. Sometimes that ends up being what it's like. So that's intelligent disobedience. But let's talk a little bit more about this whole notion, shall we? Intelligent disobedience, more often than not, is a means of protecting the business from itself. Now, I was a delivery executive for IBM and American Express, and I had 465 people reporting to me, and I used to get literally nearly 300 emails a day. There is no way I could answer all of those completely. There is no way I could even read all of those completely. So there's a lot of things that are coming into my world when I'm doing that, right? So as a manager with that kind of view to the world, all these little snapshots of opportunities, I genuinely think the people in this room and project managers do have a vision to what is happening in the environment that a project sponsor, your boss, might not have. So when I use that analogy, I think it's rather accurate, because there are things that we're going to see that others aren't. The idea then of intelligent disobedience is to be able to sift through that, enhance your own personal success in terms of how you can deliver a project, ultimately work with the nature of the businesses that employ you and their ultimate business outcomes that they're looking for, and then finally, if we're doing this successfully as a team of people, as a set of colleagues in project management, it'll help this profession as well. All right? Now, there are tricks associated with this, however, and I want to talk about a few that are more intriguing. Okay? What I'm about to share with you is not for the meek. We are talking about doing something potentially counter to what your manager has asked you to do. And that's not always so easy. I want to suggest that some rather powerful, some people would consider Warren Buffett to be successful. A little bit, okay? He had this quote. It talked about, too often he was silent. He did not speak up. He saw something that made him uncomfortable, yet, as it says here, collegiality trumped independence. And he did not say anything. Sound familiar? Do you have that time? Something's just eating at you, and you don't say anything, right? I think this is one of the things that we need to address in the concept of intelligent disobedience. It takes courage to be able to do this. So some of the things that I'm going to be talking with you about this morning and in the workshop that follows thereafter has that characteristic. It takes a little bit of courage. Now, while at the same time I'm saying it takes a little bit of courage, I want to suggest that it may not be that rare of an instance. Let me demonstrate this for you. If you look at this, in Training and Development magazine last decade, and it's still pertinent today, they say the best way to shut down a business is to stop working. But the next best way to shut down a business is to follow all of the rules. Anybody in here in a police department? Or involved with the police department? Okay. I would suggest police officers have demonstrated this in our history. They call, one of two things happens if they're protesting. They call in and the blue flu occurs. They all call in sick, which means they ultimately don't show up or they stop working. Or, and in the instance that I've experienced this, it's worse. They follow the rules. They will arrest people for jaywalking. They will write tickets if you're 1 mile an hour over the speed limit. I mean, they will basically shut down a town. Now, I share this because the whole idea is police officers are engaging in intelligent disobedience every single time they face a situation in the community. They are going to say, what's the nature of the law? What's the nature of what this person is doing? They're going to make an assessment of the situation. They are not going to follow the letter of the law, which they are ultimately responsible to perform. We depend on them to engage in some form of intelligent disobedience. And so they have this on a daily basis. So we as project managers aren't necessarily in that kind of a face the law black and white situation that often, but I would suggest we could take a lesson from those folks because they're ultimately striving to do this not for their own personal gain. It's not because they want to smile or they want to do something for themselves. They're ultimately providing this for the support of the town, city, or the communities in which we live. And I think it's very important as I go forward to mention that aspect of intelligent disobedience. This is not for you. You might get a positive outcome as a result of intelligent disobedience act, but it is not for you. It is for the business we support. It's for the program that you're putting forth. It's for the business outcomes we're striving for. Okay? So I don't mean this to be a personal gain exercise, although in some instances, if you do that well, you can. So, now with any good scope statement or a description, it is good to have what something is, what is in scope, and what is not in scope. So it's very important for me to say, this is not your flaming-haired, bulging-eyed, let's be crazy sort of approach to project management. I would suggest you do not wake up in the morning and say, I got a wild hair today. I think I'm going to be intelligently disobedient 4 times, just because. I would suggest that the intelligent part would probably be dropped off if you were doing that, right? So this is not something that ultimately you're going to do unless you have a specific purpose with a specific outcome in mind, again, to protect the business. So I am not giving anybody an excuse to hold back information, to break laws or rules in your business because you don't like them, all right? This is about taking an ethical approach as to what is right for the business, what it is you have been told with the background from which you got that information, have the situation in front of you, and ultimately try to create the best outcome for your business. All right? That's what we're talking about. Also, you will not find me in judgment at any point in time associated with this, because I want to talk about the ethics of intelligent disobedience, because in many respects, it's a higher level of ethics than even would be outlined in the Project Management Institute, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the point is, what could be an everyday occurrence in one company or in one environment could be an act of an intelligent disobedience in another. And I recognize this. So what we're talking about today is a general set of concepts, but for you to apply this in your environment, is an individual act. It's an individual set of judgments, and it's an individual interpretation, and I understand that. So you're not going to have me in any sort of discussion you might have or in the workshop I'm going to do right after this say, oh, that's clearly an intelligent disobedience thing, or this isn't. It depends on the environment. Okay? I used to work with a company that had badge-in-the-box meetings. And everybody would take their pass, and they would put it in a box. And that was a symbol that says there is no hierarchy. We're all going to talk about this, and they want to have the sharing of ideas. All right? And then after that was done, they would pick up the badges, put them on, and then the person that's responsible to make a decision, because that's the badge they wore, that's the role they took on, they made the decision. Okay? So the whole idea of having very, very free exchange, okay, associated with sharing an idea in that environment, not a big deal. So if someone calls a meeting and wants to have that happen, that is probably not intelligent disobedience in that world, because it's very common. In other cases, it could be very, very different. Very hierarchical. The expectation of communication is to go up and then across and then back down with an idea, all right? And sort of push that sort of an agenda is an act of intelligent disobedience to try to get something done. So it is variable, and it is a personal thing based on the environment that you're in. So, ethics. Definition of ethics: the discipline of dealing what is good and bad with moral duty and obligation, which to me says if you are on a project that is not going well, or you see some things that are not going to drive the business outcome appropriately, we are morally expected to stand up and say this, even though it may not make us the most popular people in the room. In fact, it's probably more important that we do that. However, a couple of hints that have helped me a lot as I've tried to do that. First, it is a recognition that there is truth in two forms. There is Bob's truth, there is Carl's truth, there's Ed's truth, there's Jocelyn's truth. But none of us have the truth. The truth is the combination of all of those people that are looking at a situation. I have a background where I've been successful doing X and Y. Jocelyn may have had a success doing X and some difficulties doing Y because she's come from different backgrounds. Her truth is different than mine. So the idea of talking about this is to say, I'm going to put my truth on the table. And it is my responsibility to put my truth on the table. But that does not make it the truth in the environment in which you're in right now. So I've been working with senior leaders at times, and I'll say, look, it's irresponsible of me not to share this because I think we're facing a risk. But I haven't been through this situation in this organization. So you qualify it, that this is my truth. And hopefully you inspire a conversation versus say, that's risky, although it might be. My truth would lead me to believe it's risky. So the concept of your truth versus the truth in this area has helped me considerably. Okay, now the whole idea of going through this intelligent disobedience thing and maintaining ethics really, in my mind, manifests itself in three ways. The first, we need to take risks. The second, sometimes you just have to be creative to get some things done. Right? It's like the fly going out the window. If it doesn't work that way, don't try it again. You have to try something more creative. And like the fly, however, we need to be persistent. So I want to talk about all three of these things, and we'll take some different ways to be able to do this. The first is taking risks. Now, I think risk is a very, very big part of intelligent disobedience. Okay? And the first thing that I would want to share with every project manager in any situation is bad news and sharing bad news. I sometimes talk to project managers that are hesitant to share bad news. And while I understand that's the case, I say this: bad news ages like milk, not wine. On the other hand, however, We should not go into our sponsor's office with a cat, like a cat coughing up a hairball, which I've also seen. Okay? Categorize your truth, categorize the situation, talk about what it is that you're going to do, and put it in front of that evil sponsor or ugly sponsor that you're a little bit concerned about, right? That's the best way to proceed. This is what it is that I am doing. If you want me to alter that approach, that is fine. Okay? But bad news ages like milk. Be open to the fact that the only way to actually generate trust between you and your sponsors or you and your key stakeholders is to be talking about bad news. If everything is okay all the time, it's more of an assumption, not real trust. Trust develops between two people who have gone through something that's difficult and made it easy. And to the greatest degree to which you can say, this is happening, but I'm addressing it. What's your opinion about this? And then take you and that individual, along with your organization through that, the more trust you'll be able to have. Okay, other things more specific that I want to share with you, because there's a lot of stories of intelligent disobedience. I'm going to have a workshop we'll talk about more, and an ebook we can share associated with this. You can get all sorts of stories, but one thing that I think we need to do is take a risk, and this is the risk of using time in a different way, is we need to rethink the way we do estimating. How many of you are good estimators? Right. Okay. I'm going to fix this. You have the opportunity now, I sound like I'm selling something now. You have the opportunity to become really, really good estimators in at least 6 months' time if you follow the lessons that I'm about to show you. But rather than just tell you, I'm going to have some help to share this with you. So, Paul and Miles, could you please come join me up here today? Let's hear it for Paul and Miles. They had no idea this was going to happen when they walked in today, so they're demonstrating risk themselves, okay? So here we go. Just the quick, there's a briefing. 2 weeks, right? Yeah, that's right. 4 weeks. That's it. Okay. These are two fantastic project managers and team leaders. They have their work breakdown structure, and we've gone down and we understand what it is we're going to do through the project. And they have worked with me in putting this together, and we are now marching through doing the final plans for the project, and I get to a certain set of tasks, and I go to the fabulous team leader, Paul. Paul. Thank you very much. He's fabulous. Very good. And I say, Paul, here is our work breakdown structure, and here's our task. And how long is it going to take to perform this task? And Paul responds boldly,
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks, I put on my plan. 3 months later, no. It just took us that long to get to this part of the contract, part of the project. He's not that bad. All right, Paul is off doing other wonderful things as the team leader. So, the equally intelligent but not quite as experienced in this area, Miles, gets to tackle the task that I'd estimated at 2 weeks because that's what Paul said. And with really hard work, Miles addresses this task and it takes him
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4.
4. I'm 4. Now my project is late. And I am unhappy. Does this sound familiar? Of course, it sounds familiar. Now, here's what people do now instead. Okay? I create my breakdown structure. I go through, I say, I put these things together. I create all the tasks. I get all the team leaders. I put them together. I now have a thing and a task. And I go to the team leader, and he says,
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And I'm on my way to my office. See, because last time this happened, I've heard this before. Last time this happened, my gluteus maximus became a gluteus minimus because my boss chewed most of it off. So I take the 2 in my plan and make it. So you even know the magic math. Everybody has the magic math. I make it 4. And then it comes time to do this 3 months later, and then he's off, gone, doing those things again. But Miles is here, thank goodness, and it takes Miles
4 weeks.
4 weeks. And I'm like, ooh, I'm bad. I'm bad. How's that? Look at that. 4 weeks, 4 weeks. It's really good. So I don't address anything because it worked. But you did not address the ability that you have to improve your estimating. Paul, God love his cotton socks, still thinks this is going to take 2 weeks. And then you have to do the magic math. What we need to do in our estimating is inform the estimator. See, we're not bad estimators. We don't do this purposefully incorrectly. We're uninformed. We don't take the time to inform ourselves. And we make up little squirrely-murly math in the middle, which to me, I wouldn't say necessarily is unethical, but it really doesn't have a whole lot of strong integrity behind it, right? My thanks to Paul and to Miles. Let's give them a hand. We're really not bad at estimating. We really aren't. We just don't inform ourselves. We go on to the next thing. And if we do that little squirrely-whirly math in the middle, we think we're doing great. And in one respect, we are. And in another respect, poor Paul is still sitting out there with the wrong set of numbers in his head. Second thing, we need to adopt someone else's style on occasion. Style. Puberty's tough. Excuse me. We need to adopt someone else's style once in a while. I have to tell you a story. I worked in IBM for 18 years prior to starting my own business in 2000. And as you heard, it's taken me to various places. And I'm in Australia, based in Australia at the moment, which is really pretty cool. If anybody wants to know what that's like, I'll share it. I ran into a rather senior architect at IBM. And I'm not going to use his real name. He makes the press once in a while, but we'll call him Harry. And I was managing an outsourcing account at the time. Now, what you see with me here is pretty much what you get all the time. I'm kind of, break my wrist, I'd have a speech impediment. So, and I just enjoy what it is that I'm talking about. So I love being enthusiastic about what I'm doing. But when I'm trying to convince someone of something, particularly if it's maybe potentially an act of intelligent disobedience or doing something a little bit off-center or a little differently, I do have a tendency to change. And I did in this instance. So I walked into Harry's office. We'll say Harry, this senior architect at IBM. And I said, Harry, we're managing this outsource account, and I think we need to do this. And I started with fact A, fact B, fact C. And Harry looked at me and he goes, you're processing you're processing a variation to the architecture. I said, well, yes. I said, get out of my office, was his response. Okay, so I did. And I'm thinking about this. It's like, no, this isn't quite right. This isn't quite right. I can't accept no as an answer. Now, you need to know something about Harry. Harry is lewd, just crude, very, very direct, bold. His language is full of colorful metaphors, sometimes regardless of the company. But he's very, very smart, and he's very good at what he does in many other respects, so that is tolerated, which sometimes happens in organizations. So I'm thinking about this, and I said, I got to try again. So I sort of ambushed Harry on the way to the car park, which, by the way, sometimes when you're dealing with senior leaders, getting in touch with your inner stalker is a really good way to do things. Sometimes those informal conversations can be very, very good if you're prepared for them, and I'll do that now and then. Get in touch with my inner stalker. So I was in touch with my inner stalker, and I walked in, and I found him again. I thought, you know what? I started with fact A, and maybe he would like fact C or D instead. So I sort of switched around the sequence in which I wanted to talk to Harry. So I said, Harry, I just want to talk about this again. And I started down, and I just started with a different set of facts. And he said, get out of my face. I don't want to process a variation. So now I'm at my wit's end because I truly still believe this is the right thing to do. So I did make another appointment. He did accept it, which surprised me. And I went into his office, and he's standing at his whiteboard in his office when I walked in. And I said, Harry, I need to talk to you about this variation. And he goes, I thought I told you no. And I said, yes, I understand you told me no. I said, but and keep in mind, he's crude, right? And very rude. I said, but I couldn't go home with the thought that you were full of, and I used a word kind of horse exhaust, think. You were full of horse exhaust. Okay? And he stands up straight, looks at me, walks towards his desk, sits down, opens up the drawer, and I'm thinking, oh my God, he's taking out a weapon. Takes a pad and a pen, closes the drawer, folds his hands. He goes, I was waiting for you to take this to me with some sort of enthusiasm, like you normally talk about things. Why do you think the variation is needed? So 2 things here, relative to adopting to someone else's style. The first is, don't abandon your own style when you're trying to do something. If people know you as a person that waves their arms, don't change that. However, sometimes if you're trying to win an argument or you're trying to even engage in a good discussion, it is not a bad idea to abandon your style entirely and adopt someone else's. So in this case, I started this conversation in much the way Harry starts all of his conversations. Very uncomfortable for me, but very familiar to him with what it is that he wants. So another way to engage in a bit of intelligent disobedience is to hold on to your style yet abandon it at the same time. Along those same lines, there's a fantastic book called Fierce Conversations by a woman named Susan Scott. And I can remember reading this statement that's on the screen right now and just it stopped me cold in my steps, and I started to think about it. We need to be careful what we say so we can preserve the relationship. How many of you have had a situation on a project or otherwise when you have to have one of those conversations and you think to yourself, ooh, I need to be careful how I say this? How many? Honest? Yeah, that's crap. Here's the problem. The problem is not the fact that you need to preserve the relationship. The problem is the relationship. If you have to be careful as to how to say something to someone, the first thing that should be triggered is, I need to improve the relationship with this person. Not necessarily solve this problem. And yes, you do need to solve the problem as well, but the point is, the relationship is the bigger problem. Carefully shared things, and I don't mean rude, and I don't mean well-worded. Something that's rude is not what I'm promoting. Something that is not well-crafted in terms of the wording, but if I have to tiptoe towards Ed to be able to say something here and sort of hint and drive toward it, I would suggest to you the message you're trying to convey has a lower probability of being received. And again, I used this earlier. I said, it would be irresponsible of me to not share this is a good way to start those conversations because you are fulfilling a commitment that you have and maybe even the commitment that Ed gave to me in managing this project. Secondly, I will also say I have something particularly challenging or potentially challenging. Is this a good time to talk about it? I'll also do that as well of preparing him to say, I'm not walking into his office with an ambush, and it might just be tomorrow morning is a better time to talk about it and we can have a better conversation. Okay? But being careful about what we say rarely comes out with the outcome. Okay? So that's risk. The next is a bit of creativity. If at first you don't succeed, try a very different approach. I was the outsourcing delivery manager for American Express for IBM. I had 465 people reporting to me. You got the IBM executives who are going to be paying attention to this. I'm working with the executives in American Express in Minneapolis. It was a very, very interesting time. And by the way, 465 people, I learned more about human nature than I wanted to know. Some real interesting things when you manage that many people. And I was having trouble because this is an outsourced environment where a bunch of folks in American Express worked for American Express on Friday and ultimately worked for IBM on Monday. And they were traded. And they didn't have any say in the matter, which is unfortunately happening quite often in this world. And there was a bunch of folks that were excited because now they're working for a technology company. And then there was a bunch of folks that were just dismayed because they felt as if they were traded. And then there was a bunch of folks that kind of looked like dogs hearing a high-pitched noise, you know? Because they were just wondering what had happened. And it was dismaying for them as well. We need to bring all of these people together. And it was very easy for me to say, look, as an IBMer and leading this team, to say, it'll be okay. We've done this before. It'll be okay. But that's just words. It doesn't mean anything. So there was this image, by the way, of IBM going to come in and going to crack the whip and going to make everybody double their hours and that sort of thing. And based on some of the things I've seen in IBM recently, quite honestly, that might have been a reasonable expectation in some cases. But I didn't want to promote that. So as a means of trying to creatively get everybody thinking differently, I scheduled an indoor miniature golf course. So we had 19 departments. They could each create their own golf hole. It's in Minneapolis, across 5 buildings, which means you had to go out in the cold where, you know, when you exhale, it hits your feet. But that's it. You couldn't play just in one building. You had to play all 19 holes because we had 19 departments. And you had to get a foursome from 4 different departments. And everybody got to see where everybody else is working, what their role was. IBM, in some cases, we had tweaked the responsibilities of the departments now and then. Everybody got to see that. The managers were part of the exercise. The IBM team was part of the exercise as well. It was fun. It was fun. And it was an interesting thing because there were people that said, oh, I didn't know you were in this building, because again, they're spread across 5 different buildings. I didn't know your department did that. Fantastic dialogue. Did it make it so IBM's image as the folks that are going to come in and just crack the whip, did it go away? No. Did it tone it down a little? Absolutely. Absolutely. So sometimes a bit of creativity works. If you decide to try this idea, I did learn something, however. If you decide to try this idea, sand traps and facilities people, they really get upset about sand traps. Okay? The folks that are tending to the buildings, we had some folks bring in little pie tins with sand, and I thought that was pretty cool. The facilities folks were really not happy about sand in their buildings. So, anyhow, something else to be mindful of. Now, sometimes creativity means we just have to say no. And sometimes if you say no in a creative way, it could be very, very formidable and very useful. So, I'm going to stop talking for a minute and give you an opportunity. Does anybody have a short sort of model or story in a creative way to say no to a client? Oh, a hand went up immediately back here, so we're going to run back here with the microphone. You and I are going to... Everybody here?
So I've been doing federal contract work for a really long time. My favorite is, it's not no, it's just not now.
It's not no, it's just not now. Absolutely. Anybody else? Yes?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of... Thank you.
Come on, we'll buddy up here and you can use this.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of places we have an unrealistic expectation from the client, and they expect that we got a consultant on site, and that's the magic pill, and they'll solve all the problems. So a lot of time we actually have the same approach as you said, but I never really put it together. It's not no, it's not now. We are not equipped to handle it.
Okay? So you're not saying no, you're just saying not now in a different way. Anybody else? Yes?
I was working on an environmental issue in the state of New Mexico, and the gentleman that was my client was an extremely volatile person. And every time he came up with some bizarre thing to do to the state government, I would say, let me run on that, and I'll get back with you tomorrow. And by then he'd calm down.
All right. Good. A no, not now, and then, yep. Okay. Okay. I'm getting the time signal here. There is, I got to tell you this, I was in another presentation doing exactly what it is, and I was in the crowd, and someone stands up and says, well, I was working with a firm, kind of a small firm in Denver, Colorado, had about 200 people, and our boss put in casual Fridays. And then he got a little concerned with the degree of casual that was happening with casual Fridays, so he had to put laws in place. So he put in these laws that said, and one of the laws was, women must wear bras. Yeah, I had that reaction too. Anyhow, the next week, a woman came in with a bra strapped around her thigh on the outside of her jeans. Now, I'm not sure if that's a creative way to say no. It had intelligent disobedience, but it certainly was a creative way to do this. Look, sometimes we have to practice. You just have to practice saying no. So, if someone has asked you to take your status report and delay it because it might have some news in it, they don't want to get into a certain model, right, or a certain report, so they want you to bring your report in late, what should you do? You should say, oh, that was rather bold by one of you. Thank you very much, but the rest of you is pitiful. Let's try. You should say, all right, we need practice. We need practice at saying no. We need some practice. So, you have been asked to mark something as amber instead of green, or instead of red, you're asked to invent some funky color. Well, let's call it orange. What should you say? No, that's much better. If someone is asking you to falsify something on a status report, and I've had it before, right? You should say no. That is an example of a big nose. Those are big no's. I've got some big noses for people, all right? The two people that participated in my little skit are the first people to get big nose. These are nice squish balls, so you get the stress of having to say no you could work on. I've got a few more of these with me. You too can get a big no stress ball if you tell me a story of intelligent disobedience sometime during the course of the day, all right? I'll have them around. Very important, in all seriousness, that we be able to say no. The last item associated with this in creativity is persistence. Now, I'm going to skip these stories. I'll tell them in the next workshop, okay? But you should know what I want. You ever hear that? When you're gathering requirements, you should know what I want. You know, they want a lawnmower, you deliver them a goat. It does all the same things, okay? That's kind of the interesting way to make sure that you get that done, right? Okay? I'll talk about this other one soon. There is a very, very classic sort of example where sometimes it takes persistence. Anybody know Roger Beaujolais? Roger Beaujolais worked at Morton Thiokol. Okay, before the Challenger disaster, he had this graph that talked about the differences in the error areas in the O-rings on the space shuttle. And there was a very last-minute conversation because the weather forecast had changed before that fateful launch. And this is the data they had in front of them. Sometimes if you need to represent information, if you just do persistence and try to represent it in a different way, you get a different outcome. Now, unfortunately, this next chart was produced after. You have temperature on the bottom. The dark spots are the number of O-ring damage based on the temperature of launch. When you extrapolate this mathematically, they were launching at 30 degrees. The number of O-ring errors is like way in the sky. Okay? That first chart they could hardly see and hardly understand. This is the same data presented differently. So sometimes, in addition to taking risks and being creative, it takes a bit of persistence to get this done. One last story. I want to tell you about a guy named Billy. Billy's a teenager. And Billy works at an old-style pharmacy. It's a guy that runs a pharmacy. He's been around since Moby Dick was a guppy. And he's taken Billy under his arms. He's a teenager. And Billy works at this pharmacy. And in addition, he has his own little business mowing and cutting lawns. And the pharmacist and the man that owns the store is really proud of Billy, and again, he mentors him whenever he can. And at one point in time, Billy says to the old man, he says, may I use the telephone? I've got something to do with, you know, my lawn care business that I'd like to take care of. And so, you know, he's very open with him. And the gentleman says, yes, Billy, that's fine, but I'm heading to the office. I said, so I'll hear the conversation. And Billy says, sir, that's fine. In fact, I might enjoy it if you hear this conversation. So Billy goes back into the office, looks up something, looks up a phone number, takes a deep breath, picks up the phone and dials. And then while holding the receiver, starts practicing, and the phone is ringing. He's practicing a much deeper voice. Hello, 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 hello. Finally, someone answers the phone. And Billy, using this new, deeper voice, says, hello, Mrs. Carter. He said, I run my own lawn care business, and you have someone that runs your lawn. Okay, moves your lawn. Well, does he do a good job? Does he get there on time? And he gets there on time. Does he clean up? He's very tidy and does a bunch of other things. And so you're happy with the services that you have, and there's nothing like, I'm very, very happy. Just, okay, Mrs. Carter, thank you very much. Hangs up the phone. And the old man's listening to this conversation. He says, Billy, I'm proud of you. He said, it's taking risk to make a call like that to someone, a cold call. And you were trying to be creative with the different options and talking about non-lawn care things and cleaning things up, and you just didn't stop. You were persistent. He said, one day I think you're going to mow Mrs. Carter's lawn. And Billy says, no, sir, you don't understand. He said, I already do mow Mrs. Carter's lawn. I was just checking up on myself. A little bit of intelligent disobedience. Anyhow, risks, creativity, and persistence. It's a great way to approach this whole notion of intelligent disobedience. I will let you know there are ways you can communicate with me, and we can talk about this further. This conversation doesn't have to end here. If you have a business card and you put an A on it, I'll send you a free article each month. C means I'll give you a call. And T means you want the electronic version of the Mindovation template discussed during this presentation, and I have Alzheimer's. I forgot to talk about that. But I think at the heart of intelligent disobedience is communication. I've got a 26-page communication plan shell, which is normally more than you need, but it's easier to cut it down versus expand it out. So again, if you put a T on a business card, we'll go from there. So A, C, T, or any combination thereof, and this conversation does not have to end, nor does it have to end here, because I'm going to do a workshop for the next hour and a half or something like this after this as well. I appreciate your attention, a little bit of laughter, and me goofing around a little bit up here. I hope you have a fantastic conference, and I hope to hear some intelligent disobedience stories. Thank you.